Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Headline Geopolitics. I am your host, José Niño, and today I am joined by a lawyer and human rights expert, Alfred de Zayas. How are you today, Alfred?
I'm very well indeed. I've had 3 interviews already, and I have 2 more to go today. I'm on this damn Venezuelan problem.
Yeah, it's quite the interview itinerary you got there. But anyways, to start off, could you give the audience a brief overview of your career, how you originally came to international law?
Well, born in Cuba, grew up in Chicago, went to Harvard Law School, practiced law in the law firm of Cyrus Vance, Simpson, Thatcher, and Bartlett. Got bored of doing financing of public utilities and S1s and S7s for the Securities and Exchange Commission. Took a Fulbright graduate fellowship, went to Germany, finished my history at the University of Göttingen, taught for a while. Then suddenly, a friend of mine at the Max Planck Institute for Ausländisches Öffentliches Recht und Völkerrecht in Heidelberg said, "Say, they're advertising a post for a senior lawyer for the Human Rights Committee. Why don't you apply?" So I applied and I got the job. So that was back in 1980. So I worked 25 years for the United Nations as a senior lawyer for the Human Rights Committee, as the chief of petitions. That's more or less registrar. And then I retired because I wanted to go back to teaching, because I love teaching. And I still teach here international law at the Geneva School of Diplomacy. And then I was more or less recycled out of retirement and called back in as an independent expert on international order. And then I did 14 reports for the General Assembly and for the Human Rights Council, and a trilogy of human rights. This one, Building a Just World Order, Clarity Press 21, then Countering Mainstream Narratives. That's part of our problem, the mainstream narratives.
Oh, yes.
2022, and then the human rights industry in 2023. And that's where I explain I'm not only belly aching. I identify problems and then I give you concrete, pragmatic, implementable recommendations how to fix it. But of course, do they want to fix it? No, of course they don't. I mean, the thing that bothers me, and that's one of the things that I say about hijacking of the system, the human rights, the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. Do you think that they would hire somebody like me today? Of course not. I would be filtered out in the first interview because they want people who will just follow orders, toe the line. They don't want someone who thinks independently. They don't want someone who actually is committed to human rights. And the fact is that the Organization on the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, the International Atomic Energy Agency, the International Criminal Court have been largely in the service of Washington and Brussels, of the collective West. They're not in the service of humanity. They're not there for you, for me. And that is the problem. It has to be fixed. I mean, I am a believer in international law. I hardly support anything of what Mr. Trump is saying. Trump wants to tear down the system. I don't want to tear down the United Nations. We need it. This is the only viable hope for humanity. The UN Charter as the world constitution. But that means that you have to be objective. You have to be professional about what you're doing. You cannot take international law a la carte. I apply it this way today and this way tomorrow. You cannot pick and choose. You cannot apply double standards. And that is what has happened to human rights. Human rights are weaponized and they're applied with double standards. When I was the first rapporteur to go to Venezuela in 21 years, that was 2017, I asked, like any other rapporteur, for an invitation. Because, of course, it's not the country that invites you. You have to say, I would like to do a study on this and that. Will you invite me? So for 21 years, Venezuela said no, because Venezuela knew very well that most of the rapporteurs would be a priori against them and would not be interested in helping them. So it would only be you invite someone, you give them a stick so that you can be hit over the head with. So they said no to everybody. They took a chance on me. You know the song of ABBA, Take a Chance on Me. So they thought maybe this guy is going to be objective. This guy is going to look around. And I was so objective that I refused to do an end of mission report or an end of mission press conference, because I'd gotten so much material from the opposition, from the Venezuelan opposition, from the NGOs, from the members of the National Assembly. I'd gotten so much material from the lawyers, from the diplomats, from the professors, from the churches, that I said, look, guys, I have to digest all of this. I have to read all of this material before I put down anything on paper. And I'm not going to make any statements to the press. I am not into megaphone diplomacy. I want to help people. And I did. I have not been getting credit for it, but within 2.5 weeks after being there, I succeeded in getting 80 people, 80 detainees released. I also got Roberto Picon, an important opposition leader, released because I was convinced that the guy was innocent and that there was what was against him. In any event, I studied the case and I made a personal case of him to the then foreign minister, Jorge Arriaza, successfully. So he was released on the 24th of December on Christmas Day, as the case may be. I prepared the ground for the visit of Michelle Bachelet, the High Commissioner for Human Rights. I prepared the ground for a new presence of the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights in Caracas, so that you could actually work with the authorities, etc. So I thought it was a very successful thing. And I did not visit Maduro. I did visit Delcy Rodriguez with her. I did most of my, shall we say, negotiating with the foreign minister, Arriaza, and with Delcy Rodriguez, at that time the vice president, now the president of Venezuela. I had a good impression from both as people who were committed to their people, to serve their people. And I discovered that the humanitarian crisis, or so-called humanitarian crisis, was thoroughly artificial, meaning lift the U.S. sanctions and the so-called malnutrition or the problems in the hospitals, etc., disappear, because it was the financial blockade imposed by the United States and imposed also through the United States by the IMF, etc., on Venezuela, the blocking of the accounts of Venezuela all over, including here in Switzerland. The UBS refuses to handle the accounts of Venezuela because they're under sanctions. And UBS has business in the United States and doesn't want to be penalized. So in any event, the whole thing is artificial. When I read in the New York Times that Venezuela, from being a very wealthy country, has gone down to poverty, sure, totally artificial. And when I walked the streets in Venezuela, you know what I did? I took off my bow tie. I took off my suit. I put on a guayabera, walked the streets to talk to people, since Spanish is my mother tongue. of Brooklyn, talking to people and realizing that they hate the Yankees. They hate the United States. They blame the United States for their misery. They did not blame Chavez. They did not blame Maduro. They saw Maduro as the victim of the country, as the representative of the country who wants to have self-determination. They want to determine their own future. They want to determine how the proceeds of the sale of oil and the sale of rare earth. Don't forget, they have a lot of lithium and they have a lot of rare earths. That's why Trump wants them. But that the profit should not go to an American corporation or to the transnationals. Profit should go to the Venezuelan people. That's what the Bolivarian revolution is all about. And the United States doesn't permit that. Reel back, 1970. What did Nixon tell Kissinger, and what did Kissinger tell Nixon about the election of Salvador Allende in Chile? That they would not allow a socialist model to succeed in Latin America, that they would impose such sanctions on Chile that they would make the Chilean economy scream. It is written, it's black and white. And that is what Trump and what Obama, you remember when Obama decided already in 2014 that Venezuela was a national security threat for the United States. National security threat is because if it is a successful economic model, then other countries in Latin America are going to follow it. And that means that the American corporations are not going to be making the same kind of money. They're not going to be able to exploit the Latin Americans to the degree that they exploited them in the 19th century and the first half of the 20th century. So that's what it's all about, money. And the whole argument of human rights violations, etc., is just a disgrace. And the fact that the United Nations lends itself to this, the fact that the United Nations actually put out so-called reports on Venezuela. I read them all and I fact-checked them when I was in Venezuela. And I mean, the level of lying, the fabrication, the falsification, the reversal of roles that you see in many human rights reports, whether they be from Human Rights Watch, the reports of José Vivanco on Venezuela, were just a disgrace. And what do they all want? They all want to impose, as Naomi Klein writes, disaster capitalism on them. They want to impose, when they spoke about democracy, they're not thinking about democracy. They're not thinking about the people or the will of the people. They mean capitalism. That's all. Yeah. So it's not a fully capitalist country. We want to topple the government. And then they use human rights, they weaponize human rights
as a facade
in order to topple the government. Now, democracy. Do you realize that Venezuela has local elections pretty much every year? It's a bit like in Switzerland. They have referenda.
Yes, that's true. I'm from Venezuela originally, and they do have it has a federal system. It has obviously like national elections, sub-elections, and every other year. It has democratic features, contrary to what the media say. And I'm coming originally from Venezuela. I used to be living in the diaspora. I used to be kind of brainwashed into the U.S. corporate media propaganda until I started doing more research on it and going back to Venezuela and realizing that there was a lot of punitive sanctions and measures, as you mentioned, that were designed to destabilize it and impoverish it. And I want to go back to contemporary events. What were your initial thoughts about the Delta Force raid against the Maduro government that led to its capture? And what does it say about international law now?
I will use Trump's word, very professional. I must say, chapeau. They are very good. The special forces are very good. The same as the Navy divers who blew up Nord Stream 2. I mean, these people know what they're doing. They are good. Of course, it is a major war crime. It's a major violation of international law. I mean, you cannot go and kidnap the president of a country because you don't like him. And the pretext, of course, is drug trafficking. But drug trafficking, you want to get somebody, go get Noboa from Ecuador, or get the Peruvian leader, or get the, I mean, 70%.
Juan Orlando Hernandez, who just got pardoned.
I mean, 70% of the drugs goes through the Pacific, does not go through the Caribbean. The 2025 report of the UN Office on Drugs and Crime doesn't even care about Venezuela. Venezuela is peccata minuta, is nothing. There's very, very, very little drug trafficking coming through Venezuela, and certainly not from the non-existent Cartel de los Soles. The Tren de Aragua does exist. But again, the Tren de Aragua, as I know from my visit to Venezuela, as I know from information that I've gotten from the Attorney General of Venezuela, I still have contact with him for a very interesting and unusual reason. Tarek William Saab, the fiscal of Venezuela, happens to be a good poet. And I used to be president of the Pen Club here in Switzerland. I was president from 2006 to 2009, and again 2013 to 2017. And I'm also the president and founder of the United Nations Society of Writers. Believe it or not, 36 years ago, I founded it. And every year we put out a volume. We already put out volume 36, 160, 170 pages of poetry and short stories and novelettes. In any event, this guy, Tarek William Saab, is a good poet in Spanish, and I have a couple of his books. And so I correspond to him with him on those things too. But I also asked him, say, give me the figures. What's the situation with drug trafficking in Venezuela? Of course, they have very robust legislation against drug trafficking, and they do confiscate drugs whenever they're found. They do arrest, detain, try, and put behind bars whoever is engaged in drug trafficking. So Venezuela is certainly a very anti-drug trafficking country, and it can be demonstrated. But of course, Trump is post-truth. He's not interested in the truth. He just uses the truth of human rights or whatever for the purposes that he has, which is to exploit Latin America, to turn the clock back to the days of absolutism, to the days of uncontrolled imperialism and colonialism, to the days of the Monroe Doctrine, so-called. Now, the Monroe Doctrine was already an anachronism back in 1823. And it was just an act of imperialism to say, Latin America belongs to us. You know, this is our backyard, and we won't have any Brits or French or Dutch or anybody meddling with Latin America. Well, so far so good. But the moment that the United Nations Charter entered into force on the 24th of October, 1945, this became the world constitution. And the Monroe Doctrine was rendered, shall we say, null and void, because the Monroe Doctrine is domestic law. International law, according to the U.S. Constitution, Article 6, is superior to domestic law. So international law, treaties like the UN Charter, are the law of the land, meaning that the Monroe Doctrine can no longer be applied. That being the case, shall we say, the other presidents did apply the Monroe Doctrine, but they were kind of discreet about it. They didn't brag about it. What is unique with Trump is his brazenness, his vulgarity, if you want. I mean, like he said with regard to Gustavo Petro, he'd better, watch his ass. I mean, these are vulgar threats, which you do not expect from a head of state. I mean, he's not behaving like a head of state. He's behaving like a spoiled child, unlike the bully of the street. And this is a disgrace for all Americans, actually. It is a great pity for everybody that we have this man as the representative of the American people, because the crimes of Mr. Trump will fall on the rest of us. And no matter how much you shout, "Not in my name," whether you like it or not, you're an American citizen. So in a way, you get the splash of the negative backlash of what Trump is doing. But to be very clear, what can we do about it? We know from the Security Council meeting on Monday and the brilliant statement made by Professor Jeffrey Sachs, which I have it on my blog. If you go on my blog, you will find the Jeff Sachs statement in full. As the case may be, it's not a question of belly aching. It's not a question of saying we got a problem. Of course we have a problem. We know that. But how do you fix it? And how do you get the United States to stop its illegalities? Can be done, huh? And not by force, not by military forcing any event. It can be done by not purchasing any more American products like Boeing, Raytheon, Lockheed Martin. Don't buy a single F-16 or a single F-35 that costs billions of dollars anyhow. Don't buy American machinery. Don't buy Caterpillars. Don't buy Cadillacs. Don't buy Fords. I mean, there are plenty of good automobiles in the rest of the world, huh? There are plenty of good trains and plenty of good machinery that you can buy elsewhere. It doesn't have to come from the United States or from the United States appendix, Israel. Again, I don't know whether U.S. is an appendix of Israel or Israel is an appendix of the United States, because I think here the tail wags the dog. And Trump has made us all complicit, not only in a kidnapping and in illegal piracy on the high seas and seizure of oil tankers and things that are totally illegal, but he's made us complicit in genocide. The United States has provided military, political, economic, diplomatic, propagandistic support to a genocidal state. And the genocide goes on. And we are responsible for 80 years of ethnic cleansing in Palestine by Israel. We have financed it. Your tax dollars, my tax dollars, have financed the settlements in the West Bank. And it goes on and on and on. But unfortunately, the mainstream media, New York Times, Washington Post, CNN, Wall Street Journal, but also BBC and the Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung and Le Monde, they're all in the service of this, quote, elite, unquote, that governs us. They're all rooting for the hegemony of the United States. And they are actually accelerating the decline of the empire, because you can't stop the BRICS. You cannot stop the Belt and Road Initiative. You cannot stop the Shanghai Cooperation Association. And the de-dollarization of the world is on its way. It's not overnight, but in the end, the dollar is going down the drain. So your savings are going down the drain, so are mine. And in any event, I mean, we would need someone like Jeffrey Sachs or like John Mearsheimer in government who would actually advise the president. I would love to see Jeffrey Sachs in the position of Secretary of State. I would love to see someone like John Mearsheimer being National Security Advisor. But again, it's not going to happen. Not in the world we were living in. So we have to see how we survive this period without entering into a nuclear confrontation, either with Russia or with China. Now, Russia has been rather restrained, notwithstanding all the provocations. And it's only now, yesterday, I believe, that they used for the second time an Oreshnik missile. These hypersonic missiles with multiple warheads that spread. Now, it's a very powerful weapon, which thus far has been used with conventional load, but could be used with nuclear load. And let's think about it. It's not good for you, it's not good for me, it's not good for humanity at large. So when you have two nuclear powers confronting each other, what you need is de-escalation. I mean, it's complete bankruptcy of our system if we cannot find a modus vivendi with the Russians. They exist. The Chinese exist, and they're not going to go away. So, you know, what childish fantasy does Trump have that makes him think that he can order people around, that he can intimidate the Russians or intimidate the Chinese? I mean, these are different cultures, and they're rather patient at that. They're not overreacting. They don't engage in megaphone diplomacy. They look, they listen, they actually react at their own timetable. They know what they can do and what they should not do if it's going to ultimately hurt them. So they're only going to hurt us when it only hurts us and not them. So
real quick, I know you have a constrained like timetable, but do you believe multipolarity could be a force for good in terms of going back to sound principles of international law?
Well, as I said, I believed in international law all my life. I specialized on international law at Harvard Law School. And one of the reasons I left commercial law, because that's what I was doing at Simpson, Thacher and Bartlett, although it's a great firm, huh? If anybody needs a good lawyer, go to Simpson, Thacher and Bartlett. It's a fantastic firm. And I must say, my experience with my boss at the time, I loved Joel Hoffman. I worked for Joel, and Joel used to work for Cyrus Vance, and I enjoyed that time very much. But I believe in international law. It's my thing. It's far more interesting to me than commercial law, like mergers and corporations. So that international law is there the violation of international law does not create new international law. It just shows that we don't have an enforcement mechanism to punish the violator. But international law remains there. We just have a crime that thus far has remained unpunished. But that doesn't mean it will remain unpunished forever. When I think of, probably doesn't mean anything to you, Hans Frank. I don't know whether that tells you anything. He was the Minister of Justice in Nazi Germany. And a supremely arrogant man. He considered himself to be above law, above all law. And he ended up with a noose around his neck and hung in Nuremberg. And he never thought that it would end up being hung himself, Minister of Justice that he was. So I don't put it past, shall we say, possibility that Trump will end his days behind bars. I think that would be a good thing if Trump ends up behind bars. And when I say Trump, I say also Pete Heges and Marco Rubio, because they're all complicit. I mean, there's no way that you can stay in a government without resigning. If you don't want to be complicit in the crimes being committed by Trump, you'd better bail out. You better say, I resign, because it goes against international law, it goes against domestic law. Don't forget, Article 6 of the U.S. Constitution says that all the treaties signed by the United States, including the UN Charter, are the law of the land. And that means that Trump is violating the U.S. Constitution by all of these things that he's doing. And so you become complicit. So better. I mean, if I were Tulsi Gabbard, I would leave. If I were Robert F. Kennedy Jr., I would leave. I would resign and say, I cannot be part of this team because this team has become a criminal organization. Keep that in mind. And the same thing goes for NATO. NATO had a raison d'etre as long as you had the Warsaw Pact and you had a very aggressive, expansive Soviet Union that wanted to come west and make everybody into communists. But the moment that the Soviet Union disappears and the moment that the Warsaw Pact is dissolved, NATO should have been dissolved. And what did NATO do? Create artificially an enemy so that it could continue its existence, but then it morphed from being a defense alliance into a war coalition. So it became the war coalition of the United States that would carry out aggression in Yugoslavia, carry out aggression, war crimes, crimes against humanity in Afghanistan, and then this revolt against international law, 2003, the invasion of Iraq. And there, as I say, Maduro is lucky to be alive because Saddam Hussein also ended killed. And actually, the orchestrated coup against Hugo Chavez back in April 2002, that one, the idea was to have Hugo Chavez eliminated. And Chavez was so popular in Venezuela that the army liberated him within 48 hours and the coup d'etat petered out. But as I say, Maduro, at least he's alive and his wife is alive. They're going through a rough time, humiliation. His people have been humiliated. I think 56 people were killed also in the course of the kidnapping. That, of course, is 56 murders, because if you kidnap somebody under domestic American law and you kill somebody in the course of the kidnapping, that's murder. Murder first degree, huh? Not second degree, first. So that would carry in many states of the United States the death penalty. By the way, I am against capital punishment. I think that capital punishment is not very civilized. But talking about civilization, what is Trump doing? is not only war on the United Nations, war on the UN Charter, war on international law, war on civilization. We're watching a civilizational collapse in the collective West. We, because we finance genocide in Gaza. The Europeans, because they also finance the genocide in Gaza. And because we tolerate piracy in the high seas. We tolerate kidnappings, international kidnappings, etc. And this reminds me of another, if you are a lawyer, that will ring a bell with you. You probably have never heard of the doctrine male captus, bene detentus. It is an illegal capture, but it is fine and dandy for a trial. Bene detentus. Good that we have him detained so that we can try him. But that has actually a second level, second meaning. You realize that a judge is supposed to be there to affirm justice. A judge, the function of a judge is to ensure that justice is done. And how can he exercise jurisdiction over a case if a greater crime has preceded that trial and the crime is committed by the administration? If your own government gets a person through an abduction and through killing 56 people, you as a judge cannot say, I will preside over the trial of this individual who's a victim of a kidnapping. It is contra legem. It is a contradictio in adjecto, as the Romans used to say. It is cognitive dissonance. How can you possibly exercise jurisdiction over Maduro when he was brought into the country illegally? But again, I am dismayed at the near silence of the Europeans. The Europeans who used to have an image of respectful of international law, respectful of the principle of due process, respectable of human rights. Well, they're bankrupt. The Europeans are morally bankrupt. And so is the United States government. And I say government, not the people, because thank God they are good people like Jeffrey Sachs, like John Mersheimer, like Stephen Kinzer, like Dan Kovalik, like the late Francis Boyle in Illinois, one of my great heroes, Professor Francis Boyle. As the case may be, it's important to reaffirm our commitment to international laws. I said, although I see international law being attacked, all the more reason to come forward and defend it, because we need it. We need the United Nations also. If we didn't have the organization, we would have to create something similar to it. And I thank the United Nations for something way before you were born. October 1962, the Cuban Missile Crisis. Without the United Nations, I think we wouldn't be here, because the confrontation of Khrushchev and Kennedy, which was played out in the United Nations with Adlai Stevenson III debating Valery Zurkin. By the way, I met Valery in my function as Secretary of the Human Rights Committee. In any event, without that giving off of steam, this opportunity of publicly arguing your cases, I don't think you would have had a meeting of the minds. I think that one of the two guys would have pressed on the red button, and then we wouldn't be here. So my fear is that Trump is a megalomaniac, and he is capable of pressing on the red button. I don't have any fear of Trump, Putin rushing to a third world war. He knows what it means. The Russian people suffered 27 million deaths in the Second World War. He doesn't want a rerun of that. But of course, if we have a nuclear confrontation, then everything goes. The global north and the global south and the east and the west all goes. And I suppose some cockroaches will survive and some mice will survive. But I think we're cooked if we make that crucial mistake. So that's why I am a pacifist. That's why I've always been a pacifist. And I believe that what we need is diplomacy. We have to rediscover diplomacy and negotiation and trying to go for a modus vivendi with the other fellow, not to try to take advantage of the other fellow. But as I say, we have, and probably, I don't know, because you probably had your education in the United States also. I went to high school in Chicago and in Boston, etc. Well, I mean, we were so indoctrinated into believing that we were the good guys by definition. And that implies that the other guys are the bad guys. So, I mean, this kind of fantasy world in which we grew up and the relentless propaganda that we were fed in our early years. I mean, it takes a while to wake up from this, shall we say, self-serving illusion that we have a mission for the world to bring democracy and to bring human rights to the rest of the world. We don't. That's something that we have invented and something that serves not you, not me. It serves the military-industrial complex. And as you well know, the stocks of the military, Raytheon, Boeing, etc., have all benefited from Mr. Trump and his bellicosity, belligerency. So having said that, I see the time is getting close to my next interview. So if you have one last question, quick.
Oh, no, I think we covered sufficient ground, and I think you brought some very good points about international law, Alfred, because it's very important that we stick to these principles. Yes, it's very important to stick to these principles, or else we're just going to be living under a law of the jungle type of environment.
Indeed.
Anyways, yes, agreed. Anyways, before we leave, where can listeners of the show follow your work?
Well, I have my website, www.alfreddezayas.com. And then I have my blog, which is dezayasalfred.wordpress. And you will see it in my email to you. Both addresses are at the bottom under my name. You have both the blog and the website. And of course, I write regularly for Counterpunch. So if you go on Google and you do Zayas Counterpunch, you'll get about 120 articles by me in the last 2 years. And you might find that amusing, if nothing else.
Great. Thank you again for coming on to the show. Really enjoyed your insights. And for the audience, thank you for listening. Be sure to subscribe, share, and stay tuned for more conversations on global politics. Until next time, I'm José Niño.
Bye. See you.